The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this March 25th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening. That's from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Time or 11 a.m. Pacific Time. If you can't catch either of those shows, go to my website at arcticbeacon.com. That's arcticbeacon.com, and you can get shows going back 10 years. My, how time flies. And I can remember sitting here. My guest today is Leo Zagami from Rome, and I'm sitting in Southern California. He's in Rome. Two great cities, by the way. But I remember talking to Leo 10 years ago almost about the same subjects when people weren't talking about this subject. Leo's continued to do his research and has written a number of books. We want to get into some of those during the shows, tell you how to get them. But let me give you just a brief recap. Leo basically grew up understanding what the Illuminati was because he came from an aristocratic family and basically was an insider. And decided to defect and tell the world what was really going on behind the scenes. And when I first met him, there were so many different connections that we had made, in a sense, that I had made when I was a journalist over there. And it all started with something called Operation Gladio. And we had talked about this a number of times on our show. And Leo filled in some inside information that was invaluable regarding some of the high-level people involved in the Italian government, some of the recruits that the CIA would gather, like Licio Gelli. And Leo knew these people. He knew how the insiders worked and put together for me a really good framework of what the strategy of tension, what terrorism was like in Italy, and how these false flag events were being controlled by the Vatican, by the mafia, by CIA insiders, the CIA itself, and how they would blame these bombings that occurred in Rome, many during that period of time during the early 80s, on left-wing communist groups, etc., and to create this tension. And I had really a great interest in this because I was almost killed by Operation Gladio. When I was working as an editor in the American newspaper and a bomb blew up, they put a bomb in the newspaper 10 days before Reagan came, and I was about literally 3 seconds away from death if I was in the hallway when that bomb blew up. I happened to be lucky, and I went downstairs, and about 5 seconds when I went downstairs in the newsroom, the bomb blew up. There was me and another Italian in the office, and that began my research into what really was going on, because I said, how could they get in this building? Operation Gladio. Leo knows about it, and it is moving today just as strong as it was then, but it's on a global level. Leo, you knew the roots of this, but let's start with Brussels. What's going on? You're in Rome, close to this. Give me some information that you got on what really happened.
Well, it's interesting, first of all, that in Brussels on the 11th of February, and we know that the Illuminati like very much the 11th as a number, the number 11. Basically, on the 11th of February, 49 nations from NATO gathered under order of the head of the Pentagon. So, I mean, they issued a convocation for all the ministers of defense of the various countries of NATO. And it seems pretty strange that, of course, this was done a few meters away from what is basically the headquarters of this ISIS plot in Europe. So, after the war, they created this NATO, and they had the headquarters in France. But of course, after the de Gaulle period, which de Gaulle, General de Gaulle was an anti-NATO. He wanted to kind of do things differently at that time for France, and so they moved the whole thing in Brussels. And so Brussels became really the headquarters also of this whole conspiracy of strategy of tension that you lived yourself on your own back because of these numerous terrorist attacks that were carried out in Rome, and unfortunately you were a victim of one of them, but we know there were many others, and many victims were unfortunately fall victim of this situation, which is still has to be cleared after all these years, because both NATO and the US never really cleared their position in this strategy of tension. In any case, it's interesting one thing that a few days before the Brussels attack, there was actually an internet blogger called David Chase Taylor who actually talked about the fact that the CIA was plotting a mass attack in Belgium. So these kind of things, of course, many of the mainstream media love to call us conspiracy theories and so on. But, of course, I think that there is much more to it. One thing is that they have let, in the last 10 or 15 years, actually in the last 20 years, gradually, of course, not in one day, but some areas, of Europe that have a very big, let's say, Islamic immigration, create areas within their towns. It can be Brussels, but it can be also Paris or other towns. Even Rome now, it's starting in the area of Torpignatara, which maybe you remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
Torpignatara is like it's an area not far from the center. From San Giovanni area, not far from the center. It's 20 minutes from the center. It's not really a ghetto like the ones that usually you expect Muslims to be, but they are taking control of a whole area. So what happens is that they create these areas where you seem to really not have laws. If not their own laws, they have this big colonization nearly of the Muslims.
And that's going on in Rome too right now?
In one area of Rome is starting. And of course we are not at the levels of, let's say, Belgium or France or England, where they have much larger, as you know, Islamic populations.
What about Turkey? Is Turkey involved in this too? Are you there?
For one reason. On one side of things, they seem to oppose terrorism because they have it in their own soil, and they seem to be very much fighting it. On the other, they are buying this oil from ISIS and exporting it to the rest of the world. So even the son of Erdogan seems to be involved in it. So they are double-faced in their action. They're not very coherent. They are taking money from Europe for maintaining these big camps for these refugees, and at the same time they let most of them filter and through Greece and create chaos on the borders with Macedonia. I think that really trusting the Turks in this kind of situation is unfortunately something that nobody should do, because Turkey is part of NATO, and of course they are playing into this game, into this strategy of tension, and so. How can we face this situation? It's very difficult for us in Italy, for example, where until when you were here 30 years ago, things were very different. We didn't have any Muslims nearly here. Now we are starting to have areas which are very densely populated by Muslims, and so this whole thing is starting to create problems even here. And I think that if we don't intervene immediately, we will have exactly the same problem we have in the rest of Europe, including Oslo, where I was living in Norway. I mean, you have I had the whole area, Greenland, not far from Greenland, where I was living in Oslo, which is basically like going in Saudi Arabia. You have people wearing burqas, hijab, the whole thing, but in a way that is really like against the whole European setup, because they don't want to integrate. They simply invade these areas, which, as we see now in the case of Molenbeek or the case of Brussels, they become places where the terrorists can basically hang out, get on with their business, and plan other attacks, even after carrying already an attack, because some of, as you know, apart from the main guy who's been arrested, but it seems like all these people were already involved in carrying out the attack at the Bataclan and so in France, and now they were carrying out attacks on their own soil. I mean, from what the media would like us to believe, actually there was even a possibility of a nuclear disaster, because they were planning on attacking one of the many nuclear plants that they are there in Belgium, as well as the ones that they are also in France. So, I mean, if that happened, of course, it would have been a much worse scenario than the one we are seeing now.
I have to ask you, we've talked many times how they organized Operation Gladio back in Italy with the regional strategy of tension by combining CIA insiders, using terrorist organizations, and funding this program through drugs, through the poppy fields in Burma back then. Now those have moved to Afghanistan, but today, Operation Gladio, in my mind, is working the same way, just on a global level, and the Vatican is still being used as a money laundering operation. And you're right there. Don't you agree with that?
I agree that the Vatican is not doing enough to stop all this, and actually part of it is encouraging it, because yesterday the Pope is simply going on this promotion of letting in the refugees, tolerating the immigrants, washing their feet, saying to everybody that we have to welcome them, and that actually yesterday the Pope said probably the only honest thing he said in the last few months, which is the real enemies of it all are the weapon dealers. Yes, but the weapon dealers, as we know, they're also the ones who launder their money through the Vatican Bank. So you see, even the Pope, as the Turks, is double-faced in the way he's saying things and he's proposing his solution, because you can't give knighthoods to weapon dealers, guarantee them their path to sanctity through organizations like the Knights of Malta or the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, and then at the same time condemning them.
Right.
I mean, you have to, at that point, if you are coherent with what you're doing, and I think that you will agree, Greg, you should excommunicate them. You should immediately distance yourself from weapon dealers if you are condemning them. So this is not being done, really. I mean, it's been done on paper by Pope Francis wanting to be open and wanting to condemn the money laundering in the Vatican Bank and so on. But nothing really has changed, because apart from the condemnation that he seems to do on a propaganda level, the reality of things is that a sort of Gladio is still in place. Okay?
Right. Go ahead. Explain.
It's in place. I had confirmation of it through sources that are directly involved in this apparatus. But it seems also that the whole thing is not very, is kind of fight. There is different sections of this whole New World Order that fight themselves, on the bottom. Giving into the whole thing by not, because there is for sure some kind of links with the security systems in Europe, if they're able to go in and out of countries, do this kind of terrorist attacks, and really get on with this thing without really being stopped properly. We are not really fighting this ISIS the way we should. I mean, ISIS is a state that is growing every day with a lot of money, like I said earlier on, comes in from this oil, no? And this oil is being exported, so somebody's buying it.
Exactly. And that's giving them another source of money to buy arms and to continue, right?
2 euros a liter of if you go and fill up your gas tank.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's down to 140. Okay, so the oil prices have gone down. That's true. But part of the problem is that these oil prices have gone down because there is a lot of competition by these tax-free zones and this illegal black market oil, which is flooding the market, coming in from ISIS. And ISIS, of course, is selling oil, but in exchange, they're buying weapons. They are guaranteeing the weapon dealers to grow their with their money, sell more weapons. Because the weapon dealers, like the Pope said, that's, as I said, the only thing probably honest that the Pope really has said. The weapon dealers are the ones who will always make large profit on the whole thing, because they sell both weapons to one and the other. They don't have a problem. The military-industrial complex, of course, in the U.S. produces their own weapons, but as we see, many times these weapons are used by their own enemies. And what really the U.S. doesn't want to admit, and no other also state involved in this situation wants to admit, is that ISIS has now taken from the Iraqi army that just gave in to ISIS once the Americans left, because the whole thing was arranged in a way that Gladio, if you want to call it Gladio, but I would say the New World Order and the military-industrial complex arrested all these thugs, put them in these prisons in the Iraq, and in Iraq they used these prisons basically as kind of like training camps, because one of the most popular persons in these prisons in Iraq was actually al-Baghdadi, the guy who became the head of ISIS. And he was actually a guy who the Americans used to, use, because he was the trusted person that could, manage to fix any problem you had. If you had like some kind of riot in the prison or something, al-Baghdadi would be the guy to call. So he was actively cooperating with the U.S. This demonstrates that, there was an active cooperation. And what happened was that al-Baghdadi was simply initiated in one of these transnational lodges that are part of this New World Order asset, which I have described in my volume 1 of my Confessions very well, this whole thing. And now I'm about to unveil in the next few months, in June is coming out, the second volume of my Confessions, which will introduce people to really the scenario we are living now, in this sort of end of time scenario, because it is really an apocalyptic scenario we are living here. The church is more corrupt than ever. The Vatican is probably one of the most corrupt places on earth. And it's definitely coming out in the open how corrupt they are. Even the mainstream media talk about it because of movies like Spotlight, Greg. So
yeah, exactly.
It's not a secret anymore. Things that maybe we were like hinting on 10 years ago that might seem outrageous now are pretty mainstream media, So it's quite interesting to have seen all this. But in volume 2 of my Confessions, I want to finally bring out also some documents, some things that regard my own involvement with the Monte Carlo Lodge, with the P2, and also with what happened lately with Richard Gelli in the last few years, who has actually astonished even myself, because Licio Gelli, I think in the end, realized many of his mistakes, like we said in the past episodes when we talked about Licio Gelli, and he seemed to really have understood that in the end, this whole P2 asset that then transformed himself in P3, because things didn't really finish with the P2 here in Italy, Greg, after you left.
Right.
Things, the P3 was created, which is another organization, not directly depending from Gelli, but still, in a way, patronized by Gelli. And then there was the P4, same thing. So, in the end, let's say that Gelli was still in charge, but at one point, let's say that his own brothers created their own things and went on their own path, not really respecting anymore the directives of Gelli. They just followed the directives of the New World Order, of what they were asking them to do, and even Gelli, after the Cold War was finished, started to see that there was definitely something wrong with this whole system. So he himself went back to traditional Freemasonry, more of a philosophic school, more of a mystery school tradition, as you know, something that doesn't really necessarily have to do with conspiracy, but sometimes it's if you do it in traditional way, it should be for your own good and for helping to make a better person. And he kind of left the scene of the manipulators, who at that point had already found some more powerful tools where to exercise their power in places like the Bilderberg Club, like other transnational lodges, which were much more influential than the P2 ever was. And these lodges, especially the ones operating within the military-industrial complex, the U.S. military-industrial complex, definitely are involved with everything that is happening now. I think that Gelli at one point just retired from the scene. This is what happened. This is what I have witnessed. And I think that at that point he understood also the many mistakes. Of course, one can say, why didn't he realize them earlier? You understand? Mm-hmm. Because, of course, but we have also say in Italy, better late than never, you know. And I think that the level of what was done in the Cold War years, for as evil as this was, it wasn't at the satanic level it is now. Because now they are really doing things that are even more unimaginable than they ever did before. Okay? If before they killed 2, now they kill 200. If before they killed 200, now they kill 2,000. If before there was a little war, now there is a huge war. And, you know, if before you had a few immigrants going through the border creating some problems, now we're talking about millions of people. We're talking about an organization that is clearly backed by the New World Order like ISIS, that is capable of having an organization in the center of Europe backed by their supposed enemies and operating in the same city altogether, because they all did it in Brussels. You understand? It was like it's a bit of a no coincidence, this whole thing that Brussels is the capital of Europe, but also the capital really of the whole military structure of NATO and Europe, and at the same time of the enemy, supposed enemy, which is ISIS, which is, of course, like Al Qaeda, a way of creating an enemy that can create tension, that can take away from you your freedom, your democracy, and also for America is a way also to be able to put a stop to a Europe that could have threatened, if it moved in a certain direction, the economic interest of the U.S.
Exactly.
So in this New World Order, of course, you have also these kind of things happening there.
Well, Leo, listen, you hold that thought. We're going to take a break here real quick. And I just wanted to talk in the next half hour regarding how this terrorism has grown from regional, in like we saw in Italy, to a network with the Freemasons, the Vatican, the CIA, and all these groups, the Mossad, working together to create this new large global enemy. And where it's now seems to be concentrated in Europe, these attacks could be coming to America. So let's take a break, come back with Leo Zagami from Rome in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal, second half hour on this March 25th, 2016 day on our calendar. My guest is Leo Zagami from Rome, and Leo's been an insider for a long time, telling us how the inner workings of the Vatican, working together with Freemasonry, the CIA, all the intelligence agencies, and how there always seems to be an enemy that they create. And the enemy seems, as the years go on, Leo, to grow larger and larger and larger. Where do you think this thing is going to end? I mean, not end, but how do they?
You said it larger, and so larger than anything, they can be only Russia. So that's why they really kickstart the second Cold War. And this second Cold War is really where it's all going, because ISIS is just part of this whole thing. If you think about the whole confrontation with Syria, the fact that Assad couldn't be dethroned, even with the intervention of all these mercenaries, including ISIS, which was basically not only condoned, but financed initially by the US, by Saudi Arabia, by Turkey. So all this could be possible, and where it's all going now? Well, it's going that we're having a confrontation, of course, which is getting worse and worse with the enemy, which supposed enemy, which is Russia, and this is only going to get worse if we will have in power Hillary Clinton. I mean, with Hillary Clinton, we are risking basically a full-on Third World War, which is already like the Pope said, already taking place. But this time is going to be going nuclear, because at that point, like the other day, Putin liked to remember, there is all sorts, like at least 35 missiles pointed. And of course, there's a whole strategic situation that is not playing very well for Europe, which stays squashed in this new world order scenario, and that has to just give all the countries that willingly and sometimes even unwillingly have to give their sovereignty to this EU oligarch kind of setup. Now they find themselves in the hands really of the new world order that has their own, special people that can conduct in a Nazi way, and here in Europe, of course, Nazi is Angela Merkel, and she conducts this whole European Union in a Nazi way. She's German, and the Germans seem actually, with everything that is happening, the only party that is really on the rise in Germany is the old Nazi party that is really rising. They can call it maybe populism, they can call it in another way, but it is the old Nazi party. So there is more right-wingers now that Germany has had these big problems with the Muslims raping their women and so on. I mean, how can you not become a Nazi after Köln, which was a peaceful city, which I personally know very well, becomes the stage for such for a vicious set of rapes on a New Year's Eve? I mean, it is very hard, really, for even Europeans, even Italians, not to become fascist when you see that areas of Rome, like I said to you earlier, like Tor Pignataro, are becoming under the control of the Muslims. So here the thing is what they have done is destroying, first of all, the idea of Europe, a peaceful Europe, a Europe without borders, a Europe with, of course, now will be restricted. So the Schengen will go out the window soon, and there will be no free circulation. There is already no more free circulation among the European states. And this is basically demonstrating that this Europe, the way it's been staged, it's just a farce, because they staged it in this way because they know that they have not produced, and they actually admitted this, they have not produced enough citizens. They have not basically produced enough citizens to have their own work structures going on, so they need these immigrants to bring in citizens that can work in these factories, in these places, and so on. Okay, this is basically what they need. They need slaves for their machine.
Yeah.
And this is very sad. It's very sad, and in the same time, there is this headquarters of this whole European scenario. It's staged by, there is this guy who is planning them, and he various people at the military level who are planning this, and they're working behind the scenes. And I mean, it's crazy to see that nobody, the countries and the actual citizens, they can maybe oppose their leaders, but they can't really oppose the New World Order and Brussels that represents it. I mean, if Brussels says something, It's like God on earth has said something. But behind Brussels, there's a guy called Jenny Sartz. And Jenny Sartz is the director of Strategic Communication Center of Excellence for NATO, which is not in Brussels, actually. It's in Riga, which is the capital of Lithuania, very tranquil place for them. So it's just on the back of Russia, the enemy. And it transformed basically the military base for all the strategies of the US in Europe is in Riga with this guy. And in Brussels, they seem to count more than Spain, Italy, Greece, and Portugal put together. And this US general called Philip Breedlove, I mean, a quite interesting surname, Breedlove. He's the supreme chief of NATO, another asshole. He said that Russia and Assad are deliberately transforming immigration in a weapon to destroy the European structures. We know that is not true. Russia doesn't have anything to do with this crisis. I personally been in Russia many times. I've been a long time friend of Russia. I've been known of oil, plenty of diamonds, plenty of goods to sell. So they don't want to really go in other countries, if not their own, and they regarded, of course, Ukraine as their own country, but not because it's their own country. But here we're talking about pacts that have been made 60, 70
right.
years ago. I mean, we're talking here about pacts that were done between Stalin and Churchill. You understand? So
right.
Why going and breaking these assets, meaning deliberately wanting to destroy the equilibriums, and then, of course, creating out of Putin enemy number one, without really saying, this guy is actually the only one who tried to stop ISIS in the real sense of the term. He went there and bombed the hell out of them.
Exactly.
He conducted this whole operation to defend the Christians in Syria, in Iraq, something that America has not done. So,
exactly.
Here.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what are people in
Russia defends Christianity? These are the people instead what they're doing, Greg. We know what they're doing. They're giving in to the Jesuit plan. The Jesuit, New Age, relativistic, all gay, all lesbians, all transgressive, all open to whatever perversion under the sun. But this is not conservative Europe or America. This is a diabolic plan that, unfortunately, today in America can only one person can save us from all this. And I'm sorry to say this now on the radio. I might seem like I'm provocative, and at the same time I'm taking a stand here. But the only one that can save us from all this is Donald Trump. Because you want to put Hillary Clinton, which is hell on earth, which has his personal lover of Hillary Clinton called Uma, whatever. She's a cousin of Osama bin Laden. We're talking about a lesbian in bed with our future president, who is the cousin of Osama bin Laden. But I'm sorry, guys, but I prefer Donald Trump a million times, even if he's in bed with the Israel or any other form of business, because he likes to do business. But,
I was going to ask you, how do the Italians view our election process right now, the debates and what's going on here?
There is, this moment of time, special representatives of America in the forms of ambassadors, CA envoys that are visiting Europe and trying to maybe realize a different network, because this situation is creating a different political network. So in France you have Le Pen. For example, of course, it's very difficult that Donald Trump becomes president, because we know that it might really create a big problem to not have a guy who is in a secret society for the elite. So they will do anything to stop him, including murdering him or maybe stopping him in any other way possible. But we can't expect anything from these people, because Hillary Clinton, she has murder on her hands. We know that. We know that she's guilty on Benghazi, there is evidence that she's guilty that has not been yet taken out by CIA, people in the CIA. And I think that if the worst goes to the worst, Hillary Clinton will find herself with a bunch of scandals after her election. So at that point, America will be in a critical situation, on the verge of a civil war, and already the fact that Trump doesn't get to power, it will create a civil war, maybe. So what is the solution from the New World Order? It's just letting Trump get on with it and probably get his reality show on the road, this new presidential U.S. reality show. I know that it might seem provocative from me, but remember how Ronald Reagan was perceived when he went into presidency.
Yeah, now, I was just wondering how the Italians view Trump. Do they view him like some Americans, that Trump will lead us into war because of his attitudes?
No. Actually, I can tell you one thing here in Italy. The elite, which is in bed with the Jesuits, which is the Democrats, which are in bed with Obama, with Hillary Clinton, they fear the rise of Trump, because at that point, there will be nobody, they will be stopped. Instead, if Hillary is in power, nobody will stop Matteo Renzi, nobody will stop Angela Merkel, nobody will stop David Cameron, nobody will stop basically these crooks that are ruining Europe, and this will be hell on earth here. We will go towards chaos both in the US and in Europe. So at that point, we can really expect not only the fall of the states, but at that point, we can expect that there will be complete chaos, and so Europe will be transformed basically in a sort of Israel, where every day you have terrorist attacks on the roads, where you can't live anymore in security. They are literally transforming Europe in a sort of Israeli scenario. But we are not living near Palestine, and we have people, we are not like Europe wasn't like this before. You've been living here before. Mm-hmm. But that's what they want to try to, by limiting the freedom of Americans, saying them, you can't go to Europe because it's dangerous. And this, it's the first time really that the U.S. State Department makes this kind of statement, in a way, just don't go to Europe. Have you ever heard something like this?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It hasn't been heard since the Second World War. So, either we go to war and we just say to everybody, we are in war. So at this point, if we are in war, what we should do? We should go and fight the enemy. But the enemy is being created by them. So they don't want to fight this enemy. Because if it was an honest group of people conducting business also at a military level, they will do what Donald Trump and everybody else said. We will go there and we will wage war against these people in a face-to-face, not letting them come into Europe or America and kill innocent people and civilians. There is also another thing that is not understandable, and a lot of people here like Trump for this reason. It's okay to let a few refugees in, but if you are millions, why don't you give them a bloody machine gun and let them fight their war to free their own town, to free their own houses? This is how it worked, guys. We are forgetting the First and Second World War. When you are at war, you have to fight. It's not, it doesn't, if they start creating the same scenario in Iraq or Syria and Italy, we're going to move all the Italians to England? Come on, let's not be ridiculous, guys. This is really ridiculous. We have to really wake up to the fact that we are in war, so then give them a weapon and tell them, you and your family stay where you are, fight for your town and free your town from the enemy. This is how it worked in the Second World War. How did the Americans move back into Europe? By giving weapons to the partisans and the people opposing the Nazis.
Exactly. What's the refugee situation like in Italy now? I know they were being swamped, right, with illegals coming over, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, the situation here is worse each day, and still the summer has not even started, because when the sea is flat, they will come in the millions. We can't stop them.
And where are they at? Where are they getting in? Where are they coming? To southern Italy, into Sicily, or how's it work?
Yeah, today Prime Minister Matteo Renzi today is in Lampedusa, which is basically in Sicily, south of Sicily, the first island, where, north of Tunisia, north of Libya, you have Sicily. And of course you have little islands like Lampedusa, who is actually one of the main posts where they arrive with all these ships that basically ISIS fills up ships full of desperados, gets money for them, because he doesn't do it for free, and then leaves them in the middle of the sea. So either you save them or either they die. So if the situation doesn't change, so how are you going to change the situation? Well, there is many ways of changing the situation, and it can be done in 1 week, but they don't want to do it.
Right, so you're talking about millions of people just flooding into Italy, right?
We are talking about, at least in one summer, we had over 100,000. So we're talking here about now increasing numbers. So we're talking probably in the range of 500,000 in the next few months.
Are these mostly Syrian refugees?
No, nothing to do with Syria.
No?
It's all to do with Libya.
Okay.
Libya is also ISIS territory, let's not forget. In Libya, it's basically all the immigrants that have been flooding from the areas where Boko Haram or whatever. There is this news since yesterday night that is going around the fact that Boko Haram finally has said they are giving up on the war. I mean, this will be a first kind of unheard scenario, because Boko Haram has given their loyalty to ISIS. So this is being seen as a kind of maybe a turning point. But the problem is that they have deliberately financed both the French, the English, the Americans, these terrorists, so they can take over whole areas of Africa, take over their goods, take over, their oil, their diamonds and everything. That's what they want to do, and that's what they continue to do. These desperados then push north. They arrive into Libya. Libya already is chaos. People arriving from all over the Middle East merge with people arriving from Africa, and then they push in and they arrive thanks to ISIS, who, of course, has all the interests of flooding Europe with Muslims, pushing them into Europe.
Now,
so it's quite chaotic, to say the least.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing, all these people flooding Europe. And, same with the borders here in America. The same thing is happening. And do Italians, Leo, with Obama being in now for 8 years, consider America to have weakened its position in the world because of what Obama's been doing?
You see, you have Italians and Italians. Like you have Americans and Americans. I will never generalize on an American. You can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat. So you can be either black or you can be white. You can be gay, you can be straight. I mean, there is many ways you can be. So I can say that the Italians at the moment, the majority here that is really suffering the situation, especially in the suburbs, in the areas of poverty, they are definitely against Obama, against the Democrats, against Matteo Renzi, against everything that is Democrat. Because now in Italy, since you left, we have the rise of the ex-communists that call themselves now the Democrats. They are the Democratic Party, like you have in America. And they aim to be like the ones in America. And what they promote, this immigration. They have people like Boldrini, who is one of the ministers, one of these people, spokesmen there in Parliament. She's this person. She's always saying, "Oh, you have to accept the immigrants, give them more opportunities, give them this, give them money, give them this, whatever, give them your bed, give them your wife." Nearly soon. This is the situation that you have with the left wing, and this left wing is still very consistent in Italy, and it's all these people who think we can still, be nice people and get on with it, but they are not anymore present like you used to have for at the time you were living in Italy. The communists were the ones living in the poor areas,
Right.
Or in the areas where you had the more common people. Now it's the contrary. Now in the rich areas, the exclusive Parioli area, you have the communist chic. It's chic to be communist and to be left-wingers and to be a Democrat. Okay?
Things have just shifted just 360 degrees. Huh?
You say in the poor areas you have the fascists, the people who are fed up, who will vote Donald Trump, and who want Le Pen, and who want out of Europe and out with all this rubbish and want back their sovereignty. So this is a very dangerous situation because, okay, the rich can become all communist and democratic and Jesuit, basically, because the Jesuits are the ones who invented communism, as we know, and are the ones who are behind the Democratic Party more than any other. And this is a big problem, because the Jesuit Pope is including in his speeches every day the fact that you have to accept these immigrants. He is deliberately letting this whole thing, happen. He's not taking a stand to defend Christianity, and yesterday he washed the feet of Muslims and of other religions. Now, if you wash the feet of a Christian, I can understand. It's the washing of the feet, is very holy ritual in the Catholic world. You do it before Easter. You don't wash the feet of another religious guy from another religion who hates you in any case.
Exactly.
So this is really where we're going. We go towards a Jesuit New World Order, and Jesuit means then relativism, New Age, one world religion, and a destruction of the sovereign states. So this is basically the scenario that we are unveiling, and it's also going to be unveiled in volume 2 of my Confessions, which is coming out in June, which I hope your listeners will go and buy after they read volume 1, of course. Which already...
Yeah, Leo, we only have a couple minutes, so tell us how to get your books.
Now, my books are out on CCC Publishing San Francisco. They can be acquired through the internet, or they can be bought also at Barnes & Noble across the United States. And so it's Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 1, Volume 2, and also Pope Francis the Last Pope, ? Which is another book which talks a lot also of the problem with immigration in relation to ISIS, to the Vatican, and how the Vatican really profits from poor people, because desperation is the #1 business for the Vatican. That's how it is.
And these books are all in English you talked about now, right?
Yes, these are the ones in English. Of course, I have made many other books in other languages, but these are the ones in English.
All right, and that new one's going to be out in June, right?
Volume 2 is going to be out in June, yes.
Well, let's make sure that we do another interview before then, and we still got a minute and a half. In a minute, tell me, do you think that after this, when we're dealing with this ISIS crisis, do you ever see China and Russia aligning up against the United States and its allies in Europe?
I think that the ISIS crisis is nothing compared to the crisis with Russia. The crisis with Russia, if Donald Trump doesn't come in, it's going to worsen with Hillary Clinton. And we are risking nuclear. We are risking a Cold War that this time can get really hot, though.
About China? Who are they going to line up with?
China is already lined up for many years with Russia. But in this New World Order scenario, you see, we could maybe see a New World Order led. Also, China has very much interest with the Rothschild family. You see, They have come in with 20% in the Bank of China. There is a whole deal there that goes on.
Leo, you know what? Let's save this, Leo, for next time, okay? Because we're all out of time. We'll talk about China next time. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, and we'll talk again, okay?
Well, remember the Jesuits were first in China, so next time we have to talk about that. All the best to your listeners, and take care. God bless America.
Okay, Leo.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800 375 4188.